All right, what's going on, Colts Nation? So the Indianapolis Colts have requested another interview here for a potential defensive coordinator. According to Tom Pelissero, the Colts have interviewed Brown safeties coach Ephraim Banda today for their defensive coordinator job. So, Derek, now that marks three potential candidates for the Indianapolis Colts. And wanted to talk today real briefly on there is this connection between the three different guys, a point of emphasis, if you will, that the Colts have made very clear with their first three candidates here. And that is the focus on guys who specialize in the secondary, guys who are going to specialize in the defensive back room, the corners, the safeties. And Derek, we obviously know how much the Colts have struggled in the last couple of years in that department.
Yep.
The Colts like to go young and haven't invested, honestly, when you look at it, a ton into that room. I mean, you have a third round pick, a couple former third round picks. You have a seventh round pick and then a second round pick who can't stay on the field. So you basically were out there running, two undrafted guys in Kenny Moore and also a guy that you brought in, Samuel Womack, and then, another guy in Jalen Jones who's a seventh round pick. So, I mean, essentially you're running these late to undrafted guys at your corner room and these, former third round safeties that, aren't necessarily guys that have proven that they could be top players at the position. But now it feels like it's very evident, Derek, with how the Colts are approaching kind of their defensive coordinator search early on here, that they really want to make a point of emphasis on improving that unit. I mean, Chris Ballard said it in his end of the year presser, right? When asked about the DBs, he said, we need them to be better, right? So I guess I'm kind of looking at this, Derek, and I guess that leads me to the question, based off of how so far the Colts' point of emphasis has been on the DBs, right, in terms of the type of coaches they're looking for, potentially that will be their candidate, one of those guys or somebody else. What does that say to you about how the Colts maybe view that position right now and how they may potentially look to seriously bolster and upgrade that position here in this offseason?
When it comes to defensive coordinators, everybody kind of has a specialty. And, some of the guys, and, we've actually interviewed before this one. This one was kind of a lesser known type of interview here because, the two previous names, Lou and Steve Wilkes, I mean, those were some guys that, that have been around the league for a while, are very well respected and very well known for their defensive tendencies. But, this one is a little bit different because he has only spent or 2 seasons now with the Cleveland Browns in their secondary room. So, and previous to that, I think he had spent his last 9 years in the collegiate level. So this is a very new and young guy in the NFL. So this is a different kind of look than what the Indianapolis Colts showed their hand on originally, but intriguing nonetheless, because you're right. A lot of these guys specialize in the secondary. They're making the better usage of the secondary players. And, that is definitely what's needed. Coaching and understanding the scheme and understanding what is going to make the best usage for your secondary guys is a very important aspect to your defense. It's not enough to just develop a scheme that works. You have to understand your players. You have to understand how does your scheme impact these players and how can these players impact your scheme? They're two different things. So if you're someone that can understand that this is a young, inexperienced group here that has, for lack of a better word, just hasn't really been reliable because a lot of these guys are trying to come into their own, but some of them have dealt with injuries. Some of them have just not developed as well as they should have. It's good to get a guy in there that understands what these guys are going through and knows how to develop them and put them in the best positions to succeed in their schemes.
Yeah, and looking forward into, obviously you have the players that you have now, but looking forward into what the Colts potentially could look to do. Could you see them really focusing and really emphasizing, really improving that unit as a whole? The corners, the safeties, really making a concerted effort and a big focus this offseason on trying to, add via, I think, both routes, free agency and the draft? Could you see the Colts going multiple routes and really adding a lot of talent in there, whether it's veteran talent, whether it's young talent, into this room to really make it a unit that's not going to be a liability moving forward and is going to be a unit that actually will be more of an asset than a liability like it's been the last couple of years? Could you see the Colts, based off of kind of already what their focus has been when looking for that type of coach, could you see them potentially focusing personnel-wise when they do get that guy on trying to add some serious talent in that room?
I feel like they have to. I feel like they have to. I mean, your GM just flat out said earlier in the day that your secondary hasn't been good enough, and that's part to blame for Ballard because he had too high of expectations for a bunch of young guys that are still trying to figure themselves out in the league, and then you paired a defensive coordinator with a bunch of young guys that are still trying to figure it out, and you had a defensive coordinator who you have to have veteran guys in that secondary that know what they're doing in order to be able to even play that system. So it was a recipe for disaster from the get-go because of what Ballard has done and the lack of effort in it. And I'll say this, Cody, yeah, you need to do it, but the problem is, what did you and I say during this time all last offseason? Look at how saturated the safety market and even the cornerback market was last year. And now all these different playmakers are getting new contracts. And now this safety market and this cornerback market are not as good as it's not going to be as good as what it was in the 2024 offseason. And that is the fault of Chris Ballard, who again said he allowed himself to get complacent and he thought that somehow these guys were going to take a jump when half of them didn't. And at the end of the day, your time to have fixed it was last off season, because there were plenty of really good players that could have impacted you in a bunch of different ways, whether that would have been from depth signings or whether that would have been from who could have started over Nick Cross or even Julian Blackman when he got hurt originally, or the cornerback room, who again, when Juju Brents went out right away, what that could have been for you if you would have had somebody available then, because there were plenty of good corners available as well. So there is going to be an avenue here, Cody. And I think, honestly, it'd probably be better if you addressed it in the draft from a secondary standpoint, because there's a lot of defensive-oriented players in this draft that I think that are going to be very useful for you for depth-wise. But you have to get the veteran depth. It's without a question, you have to get the veteran depth, because the last time the Colts did that, it worked out very well, but we just haven't done it since 2022. And like I said, you need to do it, but if you would have did it last year, we maybe wouldn't be in this situation.
Well, yeah, and I feel like typically when Chris Ballard does address it, via free agency, he's found some hits. He's found the Xavier Rhodes of the world. He's found, the Stephon Gilmores. Even to a lesser degree, he's found, guys like TJ Carey. He's found Rodney McLeod a couple years ago, right? He can find it. There are legitimate options out there. And yeah, you're right. It's not as saturated as it was a year ago, but there still are players that will become available likely. And I'm sure there'll be some other players that, might get released between now and the time of free agency that also will become available. So I think it definitely would be wise for the Colts to add talent in both avenues. I really do think that, because right now in your secondary, you really don't, outside of Kenny Moore, Derek, you don't have a real veteran that's under contract. You just don't have a guy right now. So I think in the Colts' best interest, it would be great to add some, as Chris Ballard put it, some new blood into the building, some new life, some guys that have an outside perspective and are not afraid, to come in and challenge and push guys. So I think that would make a whole lot of sense. But it is interesting to me the Colts have really emphasized that already to start the 2025 offseason. And I guess we'll see, man. Do the actions line up with what the Colts are doing right now, or is it just kind of a coincidence? I don't think it is. but I guess we'll have to see. Time will tell. Actions will tell. But yeah, guys, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below about the Indianapolis Colts' first three candidates here for their defensive coordinator position and their emphasis on the defensive backs. Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. If you haven't already, be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.